So Rolf, wonderful having you on the show today. Thank you so much for taking the time. I first came across your profile, I think more than 10 years ago, somewhere on Tim Ferriss' show. It's been quite a while. And back then, quite frankly, I didn't really notice kind of, okay, what is this guy doing? Why is it interesting? I think I was too young to kind of grasp it. I'm 26 now, so you can imagine back then,
Mm,
I don't know, at 15, 16, I didn't have the urge to travel the world yet. And then the older I got, my mindset really switched. I became an entrepreneur, and at first, quite frankly, for the money. I think every entrepreneurial journey starts like
mm,
this, at least 80% of this. And then you
mhm,
realize it doesn't really matter. And then you realize,
mm,
wow, actually,
mm,
traveling in time and freedom is really the real secret sauce. And
mm,
even these days, I really try to, yeah, maximize the freedom I have, not the money. And I turn down
mm,
stuff just because of it. And only a few years later, after kind of rereading or re-listening to you, I found out, oh wow, that's actually a lot of the philosophy you're actually teaching from a long, long time ago, still today. And yeah, that's my first question. When you realize that time can actually be really much, much richer than money itself, what was the moment for you?
Well, it was very early, and I think everything that happened since then wouldn't have happened had I not made this realization. And it wasn't a happy realization. It wasn't me wandering into some epiphany about how to spend my time better. It was me watching my grandparents get old. My grandfather was a farmer. When he retired, and was able to enjoy his free time, he worked very hard. His wife, my grandmother, got Alzheimer's disease, and so he couldn't really enjoy his retirement. Like, he had spent all his time working, and in American society, we're taught that hard work will give you free time at the end of your life. And I saw in a very heartbreaking way that didn't happen for him. And so I realized that um, nobody was telling me when I was a teenager, early 20s, that time was more important than money to travel the world and to actualize my dreams. Nobody was telling me that, but I sort of figured it out that actually it's not as expensive as you think it is. Like, travel is often marketed as a product that you buy, like shoes or food, right? When in
Uh-huh.
fact, travel is just something that people have always done as humans. And so if you just sort of find ways to travel in ways that you can afford, even if you don't feel rich, then it's something that can happen. And so I made my first vagabonding trip living in a van in North America when I was 23 years old. And I just realized it was easier and it was safer. And it was more fun than I thought it would be. And so that was real thing when things really shifted. So I guess I realized that you didn't really need to wait until you had enough money, because that's an arbitrary concept.
Uh-huh.
Having enough money to travel, and oftentimes enough money in an industrialized country is different than enough money in a developing country. And so I
Uh-huh.
ended up traveling in very inexpensive parts of the world. And one great thing about travel when you don't have a lot of money is that you travel in the local economy. You take the local buses that the local people take, instead of taking air conditioned buses that the tourists take. That you go to the local concert or the local soccer game instead of going to some sort of event that's been created for tourists. And so it's a good way to go. And I think without that philosophical pretext, I wouldn't have had a book to write. And so
Uh-huh.
oftentimes the books that were available at the time were how to travel books, like this is what you should pack, this is where you should go. What wasn't available when I wrote Vagabonding was the why to travel. That life, this is the only life you have,
Uh-huh.
that time is really all you own, and you don't really need a ton of money. You just need to find the time that you have. And we're all born equally rich in time. And if you can find a way to be time rich, then you can find ways to live an interesting life that accords with your dreams. And my dreams were of travel, and I think that's pretty common. A lot of people dream of travel, but they don't feel like they have permission to travel. And so, vagabonding was really about giving yourself permission, however much money you have, to travel the world and to let your
Uh-huh.
travels change you.
And for me, I had this huge realization maybe, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, because back then I really measured myself. Okay, how much money can I make? How busy can I keep myself? Because your mind is wandering. You try to keep it busy, and booking meetings one after the other, one after the other. And basically, after a few years of doing this, you're like, wow, okay, you made some good amount of money, but now what? Like I literally, I couldn't remember what the fuck happened the last 2 years. It was just
Yeah,
like a constant stream of, I don't know, the same day every day. And
yeah.
that was actually funny. Then I canceled my apartment. That was maybe what was it? Probably 4.5 years ago, something like that. And I was like, yeah, let's cancel the apartment. I used to live in Zurich back then. I just canceled it. And I was like, okay, let me travel for 8 months. I found this wonderful new apartment in that was only being built, and I think it was like being built in 8 or 9 months. And I was like, yeah, let's travel. And that was coincidentally when I just met my wife. And then literally for 8 or 9 months we were traveling, and that was like wow, like it
Mm.
was like nothing I've ever experienced before. It doesn't matter which car you drive. I don't know, in Indonesia or in whatever. It doesn't matter. I don't know if you fly business or first or economy. At the end, you don't remember any of that. But what you do remember is these 8 or 9 months, they felt like literally 10 years, in richness
Mm.
in life. And ever since, I really tried to follow this exact philosophy. I kind of cherry pick from different sources, you including, of course, and the happiness just skyrockets. Really, when the moment you start living like that, and of course you're obviously kind of taking that to an extreme, right? As you should. But I think even for regular people, if you just apply this and try to really maximize for time and not for money, this
Mm.
mindset shift, I don't know, it's something you don't get anywhere else, and you have to travel to do that. And that's why I'm really grateful for people like you, trying to spread this word, because for me it brought me tremendous happiness, and I'm sure it can do the same for many, many, many more people.
Yeah, it's interesting that you discovered Vagabonding through Tim Ferriss because he was in a similar conundrum, a guy who's
Mm,
very driven, very interested in success and
mm,
enjoyed being successful. He was and is successful, but I think you have to intertie that with a sense of perspective. And the problem you describe in your own life is a very American problem. I don't know how it is in Switzerland, but people just work too hard, and they they
yeah.
they think that the metric for a good life is a monetary one as opposed
Mm,
to an experiential one. And so I'm lucky that Tim Ferriss discovered my book because he's brought it to people who need it, which is people who
mm,
are very good at what they do. They're very successful. They're very driven, but they need that perspective of how true success isn't full success unless you find ways to give yourself time to do what you really love. And so it's
mm,
funny you mentioned that Tim Ferriss podcast. I teach a travel writing class in Paris each summer, and I've had several students who know me because of that interview, driven people who
mm,
listened to that and thought, wait a second, okay, yeah. And I think oftentimes travel is in the industrialized world is seen as a status symbol. People
mm,
can brag to their friends, oh, I was on safari last month, or I went to this beautiful place in Europe, and that's fine. But actually, it's not the status symbol aspect of travel, but it's what you were talking about. It's that experiential aspect of like waking up on a beach in Indonesia and thinking, oh my God, I'm so lucky. I'm so glad
mm.
that I chose to do this.
Would you say that was a big catalyst for you when kind of this Tim Ferriss podcast happened back then? Because for me, I mean, I don't know how you were before that, because that was the first time we had a touch point together. How was this for you back then? Was this like the moment where wow, it clicked, or was it just kind of a smooth, continuous journey and it just worked?
It was a pretty smooth, continuous journey because I think people are very broadly interested in. I think what Tim did is he gave me a very important readership of people who would never
Mhm,
walk to the travel section of the bookstore. People who they just go to the business section, they're doing their
mm,
homework, they want to be more successful. What Tim did is he put my travel ideas in the business section. And the 4 Hour Work Week has it mentions my book in some places, and so I've been in touch with him since before that book came out. And in fact, we collaborated on things before podcasting, but podcasting changed everything. Suddenly, instead of going
uh,
on a radio show, you could be a radio show. And then, so then the ideas which he had embraced, for years before, for probably for 10 years before we had a podcast, suddenly those ideas were in the ears of people who weren't considering them before. um, and it's just a good perspective to have because I think wealth, I use the word time wealth a lot, but sometimes wealth, we limit the ideas of what wealth can be. And one great thing about
mm,
traveling to countries where people don't have as much money is oftentimes they see wealth in terms of family, that they
mm,
might not have a lot of money in their bank account, but they live close to their family and they spend time with their grandmother and their brothers and sisters. And so a funny thing that happened when I was first traveling, I was about your age. I was maybe a little bit older, and people would say, "Oh, where's your wife?" And it's like, "Oh, I'm not married." And they're like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." Like for them, the idea of being 28 years old and not being married was a very
Mhm.
sad thing because I had given up the wealth of being married. And of course, now I'm married and I couldn't be happier. But um, I think that sometimes we're so compartmentalized in the industrialized world that we don't realize that wealth can apply to many things. That oftentimes money can't touch the kind of family wealth or time wealth or the things that travel can really help you understand. I think sometimes we understand the world through screens, um, but then even if we can sort of conceptually understand time wealth through a screen, through a philosophy, through reading Vagabonding, going out on the road really helps you understand it and experience it in a way that
Mm.
can't compete to to a mediated understanding of the world. That's why travel is so great.
And the funny thing is, from an entrepreneurial lens, I really tried both extremes. I tried to work literally, I don't know, 16 hours a day. And I tried working 4 hours a day. Not 4 hours a
Hmm.
week, but 4 hours a day. Not so bad still.
Hmm.
And finally, the output is exactly the same. Honestly, it's
Wow.
exactly the
Wow.
same.
Yeah.
And I don't know. You just pick the two or three most important things. You actually do these, and then the rest you either delegate or you forget about it. Most things don't matter. We always try to be so self-important, and oh my God, the work is so important. But at the end of the day, literally 60 or 70% of the things you do just do not matter. And that was a big unlock because now I don't know
Mm.
if I feel like playing golf on a Monday morning, well, the emails can wait until the afternoon. No one's going to die. And if it's something really urgent, they're going to reach me, you know? And this whole perspective shift that, yeah, switch it around. Everything that they thought you know, yeah, make a lot of money, be this, be that, everything that society tells you, it's actually probably a recipe for disaster. And you should just do the exact opposite, quite frankly, because I can speak for myself. For me, it really makes me much more happy. Like not just double as happy, like 10 times as happy, you know? And
Mm.
traveling is such an integral part there because when I don't know, when I leave Zurich, when I go travel, this feeling I get, I can't describe it. It's like so pure and so nice. And the days really feel, yeah, like they're worth, you know, like really they have a lot more meaning. And yeah, how do you feel about that? You also have this feeling when you hop into a plane that, wow, this feels great, or is it for you normality at this point?
No, it's well, you mentioned earlier that time seems to slow down, and that's so true.
Mhm.
It's like time you experience time differently when you travel. And I think cognitively there's a scientific reason for that is that your newness sort of slows down your experience of time.
Uh-huh.
They say that when you're in a motorcycle accident, things slow down and you experience certain details of that. I don't
Mhm.
want to dwell on motorcycle accidents because that's not a happy thing, but yeah, travel, it sort of rewires your brain so you have to pay attention to everything you don't understand, and that makes each day seem like a week. It makes each
Uh-huh.
week seem like a month, you know?
Uh-huh.
And so, um, and it's funny that there's a certain balance involved too, as this experience touches your entire life. Because when I was at your age, all I wanted to do was travel and get my career started. But now that I'm in my 50s, like I'm in my home now. Like a year ago, I
Mhm.
didn't have this office. My nephew built these shelves, and I have this beautiful new office in Kansas in the middle of the United States, and that's a part of my experience too. And so I have to balance a home life, which I really love. I think if I was still, in a hostel in Thailand, like I was 20 years ago, I wouldn't be as happy as I was having a community and a home in Kansas, which is my Zurich. Um,
Mhm.
and and so there's a certain it's funny I long for both like um when I'm here in Kansas and I hear people talk about their travels, it's like, oh yeah, I miss travel so much. And then
Mhm.
sometimes I'll wake up, in a difficult situation in the South Pacific, and I'll think, oh gosh, my home is so comfortable, and I know everybody there. So I think that's a blessing. I think it's good to have a balance. I think
Mhm.
when I was younger, I was more all or nothing in thinking about these things. But as I've gotten older, I've realized that I can have both. That I can have a meaningful home life and a meaningful travel life.
Uh-huh.
And one thing I've realized is that you can't do it all. You know, like when you're in your 20s, sometimes you think, oh, I can go everywhere in the world and I can have all these experiences. Well, that's a great way to feel. But then you get in your 50s and it's like, oh, I'm going to have to make some decisions. Do I want to go back to a place I love, or do I want to go to a place I've never been before? And that's a
Mhm.
blessing too. I mean, that's a great thing about living in the 21st century. If we were living in the 16th century, not only would we not be having a podcast interview, but we also couldn't take advantage of all these wonderful air travel and just travel is so much easier historically than it used to be. And so we're
Mhm.
really lucky to be at a time where we can sample travel and then come back home and belong to home. I mean, go to the other part of
Mhm.
the world and belong to Indonesia or Peru, or to Greece for a couple of weeks and then, or a couple of months or a couple of years and then come home. So yeah, it's a
Mhm.
cool time to be alive, I guess.
I fully agree. And it's so, honestly, it's so cheap as well. Like I literally 3 or 4 months ago, I booked Bali for, I think, $600 round trip from Zurich over Dubai to
Mm,
Bali, Bali, Dubai, Zurich. I mean, what the hell? That's like,
yeah.
that's too cheap. It's like how they do that. I don't know, honestly, but yeah.
Yeah.
And it feels like it really resonates because when I tried my long travel stint after 9 months, quite frankly, I was happy to come back. Really, I
Mm.
started to miss, I don't know, the basic things we take for granted here, and now really it's exactly as you described. When you're at home, you're happy to go travel. When you're traveling, you're happy to come home, and I feel like this is like really the healthy balance of the great opportunities we have these days. And I wonder, what would be your advice for entrepreneurs, how to best structure this? Because of course, if you travel in the perfect kind of scenario, you drop everything and you just enjoy the moment there, right? But for many people who kind of do this lifestyle, they still have to work, they still have to perform, maybe a bit less, if they're traveling, but still. How do you do that? Because I had, again, both experiences. I had the experience where well, yes, I was traveling, but I was working like way too much and I basically wasn't traveling. It didn't feel like traveling. And then I also had the experience where yeah, maybe took it a bit easier. Like, I don't know if you have to give me 3 tips in these scenarios, how to best handle this travel plus maybe the family is also here. Maybe you also have a business to run all in once.
Well, I think sometimes a danger that entrepreneurs run into is, you said, how do you structure your travels? Sometimes they overstructure their travels. And sometimes
Mhm.
the best plan for traveling is to have less structure,
Mhm.
because you're just going to know more about travel 1 week after you've left home than you will sitting in your office and making all your plans. And so I think oftentimes entrepreneurs are good planners. But as I say in Vagabonding, know your options, but not your destiny. If you have every day of a 6 month journey planned, then you're probably going to sell yourself short, because what do you know when you're at home in Zurich about what it's going to be like on the other side of the world? And so
Mhm.
I think really allowing yourself to be surprised and to change your plans. You were
Mhm.
talking earlier about, like being able to come home. Once I met a vagabonding reader who made a really interesting observation that he planned himself like a year-long trip around the world, but he started with the Camino de Santiago in Spain, and that experience was so intense that he decided that he wanted just to absorb that experience. He thought that if he kept traveling during that year, it would cheapen his first experience. So he went home and he appreciated that, and then he did his other travels later. And I thought that was very wise on his part. So, like he felt so moved and so connected when he was on the Camino. He was afraid that if he stacked 6 more experiences on top of that, then it would just be this other thing that he did. And so he went home and he savored that for another few months, and then he returned and did some more travel. So I think it's wise to allow yourself to be inspired or to be moved or to fall in love, be it with a place or with a person. I think there's a lot of
Mhm.
people who, they've, like a good entrepreneur, they've overplanned every day and they meet this amazing person they sort of have a romance with on this island, and suddenly they can't spend more time with them because they have a train ticket here and a plane ticket there, and they're supposed to be in this other country on this date.
Mhm.
But that love metaphor can be stretched in many ways. That maybe they wandered into a village in Bali that's not on the tourist map, and suddenly they're learning how to cook the food there, and they've started a little tour business or something. I'm just throwing out ideas, but allowing yourself to be spontaneous is exactly the point of being able to travel. And yeah, so that's my best advice for entrepreneurs is that, yeah, know your options and not your destiny. And that can be hard
Mhm.
sometimes, because sometimes we
Yeah.
we we soothe ourselves with our plans. It's like,
Mhm.
I don't know what's going on right now, but I know that I have a hotel reserved in 1 week in this city. Well,
Mhm.
sometimes that doesn't really serve your life in a way that not knowing does. That sometimes not knowing, even as an education, that I think as entrepreneurs traveling the world, it can be your university. Travel 6 months on the road is better than a graduate degree in university, because suddenly,
Oh yeah.
if you allow yourself, you're learning languages and you're
Mhm.
studying the architecture and the agriculture of a place, and you're suddenly becoming a better negotiator, and you suddenly have all these new ideas about how you could enhance your business life that it didn't even occur to you until you went to another part of the world and started to see the world in a different way. So
Mm.
yeah, there's just so many great advantages to being out in the world that being open to new experiences that you didn't expect to happen is such an important thing to allow to happen in your travels.
This really resonates because the more free time I give myself, the more cool things I can come up with, whether it's, I don't know, for work, something creative, or also, I don't know, in my personal development journey, or I don't know, planning new travels, whatever it might be. Really, the more space I have to actually think, and this we never have, these days, the greater I feel, and really the more creative I get. Sometimes I can do the work of literally a month in one day because I stepped away from it and I came back with such great energy and with such great, I don't know, vibes. That's the right way to put it.
Yeah.
And that really comes from, yeah, saying no to most things and just having an open schedule. And then, yeah, if you meet the person, go with that person. If you find this cute hotel, go to that cute hotel. So that really resonates, honestly.
Yeah. I think another thing to keep in mind is that you have your whole life for this. I think
Mm,
sometimes if you live in a list driven mentality, you cross travel off your list. Okay, I traveled the world, so now I can tell people I traveled the world and that's done. Well, actually you can travel the world for the rest of your life. That going to Thailand when you're 23 is different than when you're 43 or 73.
mm,
And so that's another thing, being open to new experiences and diverse experiences on one trip is a thing, but then also realizing that, oh, I could come back here when I have more money, or I could come back.
mm,
Um, I, I, I could find a beach like this someplace else in the world. Or I met this amazing person who's from Norway, and I could go to her country and hang out there. Yeah, just I think it's multi-directional. Just having increasing your options on a given journey, but then also on your future journeys as well. Because I think sometimes people one reason they overplan their travels is like, I want to visit 25 countries because I'm not sure when I'm going to travel again.
mm,
Well, if you're in your 20s, odds are you can spend your entire life traveling. It's not an
mm,
all or nothing scenario. And that's a great thing. I'm sure you discovered that yourself.
mm. Well, what I'm a bit worried though, because now I'm kind of in the process of planning a family, with my wife, and
Mm, mm,
I really want to keep up this lifestyle that we have right now with the kid. And then the first thing that came to my mind, okay, honestly, why don't I homeschool him or her, whatever it's going to be?
mm.
And, or just, I don't know, try some online school format, because if I think how cool it would have been if my parents would have kind of traveled, I mean, not full time, maybe, I don't know, 3 or 4 months a year, whatever it might be, like some reasonable amount, but nothing crazy. How cool, as a kid, even how many cool things you can learn. What would be your advice for, I don't know, aspiring parents? How could you structure that? How should you structure that? Do you have any, I don't know, previous experiences, maybe your own? Like, what's the deal here?
Well, absolutely. Actually, I know having written Vagabonding, a lot of people, like probably a half dozen people have said, do you think there's a market for family vagabonding? And I'm like, sure. And so like there's some really interesting books about family travel have been written. And so it's a thing. It's happening right now. And it's a wonderful educational experience. And the thing of it is it's not well, one thing that's different about traveling with a kid is that there's just more structure, that
Uh,
you really need to plan your kid's day almost like at home, that when you're raising a kid at home, you have the snacks ready for this time, and this is playtime, and this is education time. Even more so on the road because it's more wide open. That sort of the improvisational nature of travel that adults can embrace is less available when you have kids because a kid needs a nap at a certain amount of time and a kid needs to eat at a certain time. But what's fun is that um, traveling with a kid really humanizes you. I've noticed as a young male, you know, people, they look at you and think, okay, this is interesting. This guy is not from here. But when you travel with a young person, I don't have kids, but when I travel with my young nephews, it's like, oh, okay, this guy's a dad or this guy's an uncle. And people love talking to the kid. Even if they're intimidated to talk to you, they don't mind interacting with the kid. And the kids see things that you don't see.
uh,
Like when we went to the Père Lachaise cemetery in Paris, France, I'm like, oh, here's the grave of Oscar Wilde, a famous writer. And here's a grave of Jim Morrison, a famous rock star. Well, he doesn't care about those people. But he's like, what's this? This looks like a vampire tomb. Who is this person? And so pretty soon I was discovering the tombs that weren't on the tourist list. And I was having a new experience through the eyes of a 14-year-old that I wouldn't have had had I just been traveling under my own cognizance. So absolutely travel with your kids. There's more planning involved and there's more structure involved. But it is a wonderful way to enhance your travels. And that's another thing too. I talk about how travels is different in your 20s or your 40s or your 70s, but it's also different if you go with a kid, because not only are
Mhm.
you making your kids' life better, you're actually making your travels more interesting because you're presenting yourself as a family. And I said before
Uh-huh.
about those people, even poor people see family as wealth. Where you're traveling with your wealth, that it's like, oh
Uh-huh.
my gosh, this is a super cute kid. And I think local people are just really more receptive to you. Not that they're unreceptive to young male travelers who are unattached, but if you travel with a family, then even more so that you could make yourself a part of a local community because you're a known entity. Because family is a universal language, regardless of what your home language is. Everybody has a family, and everybody has affection for families.
And how would you structure it? Because for me, until the time they go to kindergarten, I mean, of course, yes, more organization, yes, but once they do go to school, like, how does that work? Like, are you aware of any, I don't know, offerings from schools where you can do part-time offline? Because again, I think that's also really important for the kid, right? To still have kind of the same age connections, but then also, I don't know, maybe give some flexibility when it comes to traveling. Because in Switzerland, I don't think we have that. Do you have something in the US or maybe some, I don't know, international schools that offer this? Are you aware of any of that?
Well, there's curricula that you can use. Like
Uh-huh.
homeschooling is pretty big in the United States, and so actually it's called road schooling. They have different materials that you can download or you can buy that gives you sort of, if your child is 10 years old and you're traveling full time, here are some lessons you can give them, and it sort of helps do. So there's some great resources in the U.S. I'm not sure how it would work with like accreditation, keeping it
Mhm.
legal with the authorities in Switzerland. Um, but you can also do a hybrid thing where maybe you are consulting with a teacher 1 or 2 days a week.
Mhm.
Um, and then or maybe with other students 1 or 2 days a week, and then you're also doing things in the field. And one fun thing for the other kids in the online school, and I'm just thinking out loud here, is that one of their classmates is in Zaire or in Vietnam, and that makes their education interesting. I think
Mhm.
that if I was 10 years old and I had a classmate who was doing his lessons on a computer from Algeria or something, then I would be really excited about that.
Mhm.
So, uh, yeah, there's some books in English about this topic, and then there's some resources too. And if you Google around enough, you can find it. And
Mhm.
it's not really one size fits all, and there's different laws in different countries.
Mhm.
But to an extent, learning is learning, and I think that also this has been people have been doing this in earnest for 10 to 15 years now, and
Mhm.
they will do it more in the future. I think
Mhm.
that this will become more and more normal in the future. And so, yeah, don't hesitate. Definitely, you know, make careful plans and choose the best option, but don't be dissuaded from taking your kid on the road because thousands of people are doing it at this very moment.
Mhm. Yeah, I do hope it gets normalized because in Switzerland, I guess they're a bit more conservative probably than in the US, I
Mm,
could
mm,
imagine. So
mm,
here you would be a very big outlier, let's say, if you
mm.
would try that. That's great because I don't give a fuck, honestly. I like to be that.
Mm. Okay.
So that's
Yeah.
fantastic. But no, I see also here, I see more and more people kind of thinking in these terms. And yeah, if we all think in these terms, yeah, sooner or later it's gonna happen. Now, I wonder, what are your, I don't know, top five places that you've traveled to? And then maybe as a follow-up to that, what is the most dangerous place you've ever been and why?
Mm, mm. Well, I mean, one of my top 5 places is actually my own country, the US. My first vagabonding trip was in a van in the US, and it's such a big place, and there's a lot going on, and it's a friendly place, and people are really curious about foreigners. Um, and so the American West in particular, I mean, you could just get some hiking boots and spend a year just hiking around the Rockies and the Cascades
Mhm.
and the Pacific Northwest and go up to Alaska. Love that. I go every year to Paris. I teach a creative writing class in Paris every summer. Um, So in a sense, I'm working. Like, I'm not a very French person. My French language skills aren't very good, but Paris is such a beautiful city that it has to be, right there at the top of my favorite places. I cut my vagabonding teeth in Southeast Asia. Thailand is a great entry country, and then the surrounding countries, Myanmar, Laos, Cambodia, are beautiful, easy, inexpensive, and welcoming places to travel as well. Um, I've been going to Africa more and more. I really enjoyed South Africa. South Africa is sort of a starting ground like Thailand is for Southeast Asia. Southern Africa, you can start in South Africa, but then like Namibia, I really love Namibia. Mozambique was interesting. Kenya is another starting point, and from Kenya you can go to Tanzania or Uganda. And so, one problem with asking me that question is that pretty soon I'm going to list every place in the world, and it won't be a top five list anymore. But then also, I'm married. My wife, she's spent time living in Berlin. She speaks German. She's a big hiker, and so one fun thing about being married to her is that I'm going to do some more long distance hiking. And actually, she was actually hiking in Switzerland with her sister last summer when I was in Paris. She was in your country hiking around. And the summer before, we actually went um, to Switzerland as well. And so, um, yeah, no, it's the world just it keeps giving rewards to your curiosity. And it's funny, I lived 2 years in Korea in the 1990s. When I was
Mhm.
almost exactly your age, I was living in Busan, South Korea, and it was not always easy. People are workaholic in Korea, even more so than the United States, I think sometimes. But there was this ferment that was happening. Like, Korea was a really interesting place, and now our neighbor. I live in the country in Kansas. Our neighbor brought her 8-year-old daughter to look at my library, and you can see some of my books here. I have another room that's full of books as well. And I said, you can borrow any book you want in my library. And she loves K-pop. So she took the Lonely Planet guidebook to Seoul. Out of all the books, I have hundreds of books, kids' books, everything, but she loved K-pop so much. So it's so interesting that my relationship to Korea has deepened. Like, in the 1990s, people didn't really know much about Korea besides the fact that we fought a war there. The US had been in a war there in the 1950s. Now you ask any 8-year-old girl what about Korea, and it's like, oh my God, all my favorite songs and movies are made in Korea, right? And so
Right.
that's really fun to see. My relationship to Korea has deepened. And I look forward to taking my wife to Korea because I love eating Korean food. It's my comfort food. And she's learned how to cook Korean food, even though she's never been there. And so that's just another, I think maybe I've run out of my top five list, but that's another place that I have a really fun relationship to because um, no place stays the same, that I like to think that I went and I taught these young kids how to speak English. And now their generation is running movie studios that everybody in the world is watching, and that's a great thing about seeing how dynamic the world is. And just one more thing, when I was in Kenya, when I was younger, you just thought about Kenya as this place. Oh, we're giving money so that Kenyans or can live a better life. Well, now Kenyans they have hiking clubs and they have internet startups, and they have their own film industry and their own writers, and so realizing how dynamic every country is that goes beyond its stereotype. Like, this country is known for starving people. This country is known for a war. Well, it used to be that way, but now the world is this amazing place full of really smart people. And if you make the effort to go out and meet those smart people, then you can make your life more exciting and enriched in process.
Mhm. And most dangerous country, in your opinion, that you've ever been?
Oh, the most dangerous. Oh, that's a good question. I think sometimes the danger doesn't break down on nation state levels. Like, I took a bus in India once. India is not that much more dangerous, but there's some buses in the Himalayas that I probably wouldn't take again because you're riding in a bus and then you look down in the canyon and you see a wrecked bus, that's 2 years old. Um, and then also there's certain decisions. Like, when I was in Laos, I bought a boat and I took it down the Mekong River for 3 weeks. Well, that was a good adventure from my 20s, but it wasn't very safe. I wasn't an expert
Mhm.
in being a boatman in the Mekong. So let me think. Dangerous country. And I don't want to mention. I don't want to mention a country in terms of. I don't want to make it sound like, oh, nobody should go there. Um, Let me think. Um, like, maybe Mozambique. It was hard to get around. The
Mhm.
roads weren't very good. Um, But yeah, I'm hesitant to mention a most dangerous country, because then, from a certain standpoint, that will make people think, oh, I don't want to go there.
Uh,
When in fact, there's safe
uh,
ways to travel in any country.
uh,
So yeah, like I was in Cambodia in the 1990s, and their civil war had just ended. So I'm sorry,
uh,
I can't give you a concise
uh,
answer for most dangerous country, because that's a changeable thing too, and that really depends on how you decide to go to a place.
because for me, to
What's the
all
most
the
dangerous place you've been to?
well, that's what I was about to say. For me, the most dangerous countries I went to ended up actually being completely fine. I don't know. For
Mm,
example,
mm,
I went to Pakistan once in Lahore, and really, when I went there, I thought, okay, this is going to be sketchy and tricky.
mm,
But I literally arrived there. I flew in from Dubai, and of course, it's a bit different than Dubai, but also a lot of similarities. Like it's not so different, and people are super lovely. I felt very safe. Of course, in front of the hotel there was the guy with the big guns, and there was a huge
right.
wall, obviously. But I don't know if that was needed, honestly, because I was literally walking around outside, and it was I mean, I didn't have any bad experience. Same happened to me in Brazil. Everyone told us, "Wow, don't go here, don't go there." The
Mm,
same happened
mm.
to me in Argentina. They all told me, "Yeah, don't go into this region whatsoever," and ah, it's just fine. You know, maybe I got lucky. Probably it's dumb and stupid luck, but
Well,
all the bad countries, they aren't so bad actually if you actually go
well,
there.
if you do the air quotes, if you talk about bad countries, like I went to Syria 25 years ago, and that
Mm,
place was amazing. I mean, that was on the
mhm,
the don't travel list. But
mhm,
oftentimes, Pakistan is another great example. Is that a place with a bad reputation is geopolitically dangerous, air quotes dangerous. But when you go there, people are just, they're very interested in you, and they're very
mhm,
hospitable. Syria was just amazing. And I think there's like certain Islamic countries have a better reputation in the West because of certain historical incidences. But like hospitality is one of the pillars of Islam. I mean, like you honor God by honoring a guest. And we don't
mhm,
always have that in the industrialized West. And so
mhm,
to be the subject of hospitality in a country where people don't have a lot of money, and they're honoring God by being very friendly to you. And it's just
mhm,
it's a cultural. A lot of these air quotes dangerous places have
mhm,
virtues that we don't have in the West, and so yeah, I guess by reputation, I've been to a few. I've been to many countries that are supposed to be dangerous, but they don't have occurred to me as dangerous because I know them firsthand, and I don't have to think of Syria as a dangerous place. I just think of Syria as this place with amazing food. So
and to double down on the hospitality aspect, I basically maybe I don't know 5 or 6 years ago I hired some developers from Pakistan, and that's why I
mm,
went there to visit them. And the
mm,
hospitality was just insane. Like they didn't let me pay for anything, neither the hotel,
mm,
nor the
mm,
transport, nor the food. And I was like, guys, it's getting ridiculous. I mean, come on. I'm literally from Switzerland. This is okay for me. I can do it. No problem. No. And for them, it's a lot of money. I know for them, it's a lot of money. And they were so happy to do it, really. And they brought me
mm,
to their families, to like to the big gatherings. It was wonderful. It was really
mm.
hospitality. You would never get that in Europe. Never. I don't know about the US, probably also not the same level, but hospitality was insane. And I guess in Syria and all the other countries there, it's similar, I guess, right?
Very much so, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and, uh, I mean, it's not just an Islamic virtue. There's other less economically advantaged countries, but, they're
Uh-huh.
doing something right in those Islamic countries, because it's just, um, it is it's reflexive, it's expected. And I think, not to knock European countries, but like Scandinavian countries, culturally, it's just less embracing strangers is less normal in a place like
Uh-huh.
Norway or Finland than it would be in Egypt, which is one of my favorite places, or Syria, just because culturally people are encouraged to show hospitality to strangers.
Uh-huh.
And it's funny, even in the US, it's a little bit different. And so if you're in the American South, sometimes the American South has a bad reputation, but that's a more of a hospitality culture than in the American Northeast, for example. So when I was vagabonding around the US, I often received more hospitality in the South, in places like Mississippi and Alabama, than I did in places like Massachusetts and Maine. Not because people are less nice in those places, but because culturally, um, hospitality is a part of the American South in a way
Uh-huh.
that it isn't in other parts of the U.S. And that's one fun thing that you discover by travel. And I mean, Switzerland has a lot of diversity from one part of the country to the other, and I'm sure that
Uh-huh.
German Switzerland is different than Italian Switzerland, which is different than French Switzerland. And until, if you're not from there, until you go there, you can't really internalize that until you get those experiences. But yeah, now actually, I need to go to Pakistan because I have so many friends who had the exact same experience as you.
Mhm.
They just can't stop talking about how awesome it is. They have great mountains up there. The food is
Mhm.
good. So yeah, I need to put that on my list, I think.
Although in the north, the people in Lahore told me be there a bit more careful because there
Mm, mm,
sometimes shit happens, but in the
mm.
cities, I think you'll be completely fine. But again, just use your brain. I think if you use your
Yeah,
brain, you'll be completely fine. And that's usually the travel rule that that saves your
yeah,
ass.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, agreed.
Now, how has travel changed from what you want from life? You know, before you went kind of traveling, what did you see in life? And now after all these travels, and I mean, you're in the middle of the life, you're just getting started, right, with the traveling, I hope. And what do you still hope to learn from your travels that are now upcoming?
I think at the risk of sounding really simplistic, travel teaches you how to live and it
Mm,
reminds you how to live, which is sort of embracing the moment and being aware of where you are and not being so overwhelmed by certain anxieties from, making money or being air quotes successful, or even just having a family that's getting older, and worried about how taking care of them. I mean, I'm looking outside my window in Kansas right now, and I think um, one thing I don't know is like the names of all the flowers that grow on my property, or the names of all the birds that sing songs here. And so I think if I hadn't traveled and I hadn't have been curious about other biological aspects of other lands, it sort of chastens me to think, gosh, I should be a traveler here.
mm,
I've been to all these countries and people say, I'm so jealous of your travels, but do I even know this 30 acres of land where I live that well? Probably not. And so one phrase that people often repeat back to me from vagabonding is walk until your day becomes interesting. And this is good advice to the entrepreneurs who might overplan their travels is that
mm,
whatever the sites on the sightseeing list are, just walk, find a neighborhood that isn't dangerous, but usually, if you're sober and it's daytime, most any neighborhood is fairly safe.
mm,
And then just see what you discover. And so one thing I do often with my wife here in Kansas is just going for long walks. On our wedding anniversary, every year we walk to the closest town for lunch and the next closest town for dinner, and it's 20 miles. Towns are not very close together in Kansas, and so that is a way of experiencing a place. So travel has taught me to pay attention. It's taught me to be present, but it's not like that's a switch that's flipped and it's always on. That I constantly have to remind myself to embrace not just life but the day. What am I going to learn today? What am I going to see today? What am I going to discover today? How can I attune myself to how the day works? And that's an ongoing thing. And I think oftentimes there's regrets of old people or regrets of people who are dying, and they don't regret that they didn't own a better sports car. They
mm,
don't regret that they didn't um, have a more diversified stock portfolio. They regret that they didn't spend more time with their kids, and they didn't go to that country that they dreamed of going to, or they didn't spend more time eating dinner with people they loved. You know, and so I think that's a good reminder is that there's a real existential aspect to travel. That travel reminds you to be present in every day and to not let life pass you by. And that's the existential part of time wealth is that by making yourself rich in time, you're not letting life cheat you out of what you think you're supposed to love instead of what you actually do love.
mm.
And everybody's going to love something a little bit different. Like some people might go to Indonesia and they're just going to be thinking about ping pong. Table tennis is like all they want to embrace. That's not going to be for everybody, but if that makes their life better, other people are going to go to Indonesia and think about cooking all the time.
Mm.
Um, but it's by being curious and being open to new things and embracing what a given day has to offer that you live a richer life. And that's a great thing that travel can always present us if we can embrace it, even at home.
There's no better way to end this, honestly. What a wonderful ending remark. Thank you so much, Rolf, really, for your time. Appreciate it. If you need
Yeah,
some
you
travel
bet.
suggestions for your upcoming Switzerland trip, do let me know. I'm happily
Okay.
sending those over. And
Oh, yeah.
yeah, I hope we see each other again. Thank you so much.